Hi everyone, it's Ben Adams with the American Offset Mortgage, and welcome back to the channel. Today, we are going to talk about something that I absolutely love. Can you guess what it is?
Can you guess what it is?
Credit. How to use it, what it is, why it's so important, how the bureaus come up with your scores, and how to understand it so you can put yourself in the very best position possible. But before we get into our story, and you know I'm going to say it like I always do, please click on that like and subscribe button because we have a lot more exciting videos coming up on offset mortgages, financial literacy, consumer spending, credit, and everything else financial related. As a reminder, all this information is education based. I'm just trying to educate you from the things that I've learned on my journey, on my path to build wealth. Now, I do look at hundreds of credit reports each month and thousands of credit reports each year. I am a credit expert, and today I want to share with you everything that I've observed and everything I've learned as it relates to credit. Now, let's jump right in. Okay, so today we're going to talk about all of the ins and outs of credit. What is credit? Why is it important? How is it scored? And how to understand it? How is it going to impact your financial livelihood? And common mistakes individuals make when managing their credit. Okay, credit. So what is credit? By definition, credit is your ability to borrow money and make purchases under an agreement that requires you to pay back the entire amount over time plus interest. How many different types of credit can you think of? Can you think of 5 different types of credit? Well, let's go over some of the more common types of credit. Student loans is a very popular type of credit. Credit cards, mortgages, auto loans, home equity lines of credit. All of these are different types of credit. Some of them are secured, some of them are unsecured, some of them are revolving, some are installment, some are mortgage. So there are 2 main types of credit: secured credit and unsecured credit. Unsecured credit or unsecured debt is debt that is not secured to an underlying asset. Most unsecured debt is revolving in nature, like credit cards or in-store charge cards, or another example would be an unsecured line of credit. So what is revolving credit? Revolving credit is a line of credit that remains available over a period of time, even if the balance is paid off in full. As I mentioned, credit cards are the most common source of this type of credit. Remember, credit cards most of the time are revolving accounts, and they're also unsecured. Now, what are the risks and what is the risk factor with a credit card? Credit cards are considered higher risk, and the reason that they're considered higher risk is because they are unsecured. They're not attached to any asset or any piece of collateral. So if the account holder goes into default or stops making their payments, the lien holder has nothing to foreclose on in the event that the account holder stops making their payments or goes into default. And more importantly, a lot of times credit cards are grossly mismanaged by the individual account holder, which is a huge risk factor. And the reason for that is because of lack of financial literacy. So because of the increased risk factor and the fact that credit cards are higher risk, as a result of that, the APR in these types of debt is going to be much higher than other types of secured debt. What are the benefits though? The benefits are that these accounts and these revolving accounts are typically a little bit easier to qualify for. And they also include a credit limit, which with responsible use over time can oftentimes be increased when payments are made on time and the account is used in a responsible way. A lot of credit cards will offer rewards and cash back anywhere 1% to 3% on purchases. That's significant. In other cases, there can be other incentives as well. Now, if you're asking me, how do I use credit cards? Credit cards are a very big part of my financial plan. In fact, the banks pay me to use credit cards. Last year, the banks paid me over $5,000 to use their credit cards, and I paid 0 in interest. And the reason that I pay 0 in interest is because every month I pay my balances off in full, and I seek out credit cards that have the most favorable terms, the best rewards, the biggest benefits, and ways that I can optimize and increase my cash back. So if you're going to use credit cards, know the benefits, know the risks, and use them in a responsible way. Now, our other second main type of debt is secured debt. Our first category, our first main type of debt is unsecured debt, like credit cards or unsecured bank loans or unsecured lines of credit. The other type of debt is secured debt. So secured debt by definition is debt that will always be backed by some type of collateral. Usually this is going to be a financial account or some type of real estate which the lender will then put a lien on. So there are various types of examples of secured debt. Can you guess what those are?
Take a guess.
Examples of secured debt would be installment loans like auto loans, first lien mortgage debt, lines of credit that are secured like home equity lines of credit. So let's start off talking about installment debt. The most popular type of installment debt is going to be auto loans. Now, what is the risk factor on auto loans, also known as installment debt? So the risk factor on installment debt is going to be considered medium. Now it's going to be considered lower risk because it is secure to an asset or the vehicle is the collateral. It's going to be considered medium risk overall because yes, it is secure to an asset which reduces the risk, but the risks are raised substantially because it's secure against an asset that is going to go down in value over time. And the asset, meaning the car, can be damaged or even totaled, which can then complicate or increase the installment lien. Now, what are the features of an installment loan? Usually, installment loans are a lump sum paid that are then repaid over a period of 3 to 7 years with a fixed interest rate and a fixed payment. Again, examples of these type of loans would be an auto loan. A bank loan would be an example of an installment loan that is not secure. What are the benefits of installment loans? Well, installment loans, as I just mentioned, allowed for fixed financing terms with fixed interest rates and fixed monthly payments. What are the cons of installment loans? Well, because the amortization period typically on installment loans is so much shorter, again, normally that's 3 to 7 years, that results in much higher payments. So meaning that the entire loan that was borrowed plus interest needs to be paid back over that 3 to 7 year period. And one of the main cons and main concerns with installment loans is they can really disrupt the monthly budget surplus of one's budget and really adversely impact that savings rate. Now, how do I use installment loans? Well, here's the deal. I do not use installment loans whatsoever, and I don't make any exceptions on using them. The reason I don't use installment loans is because I consider them bad debt. The reason that installment loans are bad debt is because they're secured against an asset that is going to go down in value, and because that amortization period is so short, the monthly payments are going to be very, very high, which is really going to disrupt the monthly budgeting surplus and adversely impact cash flow. Installment loans put a pinch on people's budgets, and they use all of their excess cash going towards this type of debt. I don't do that. I don't believe in that. And that is why I don't use installment loans. Our next type of debt is secured lines of credit. Now, we talked about unsecured lines of credit like credit cards and in-store charge cards. Well, there's a secure line of credit that is very popular. Can you guess what that is? Now, a home equity line of credit is a secure revolving account like a credit card, except it's secured against real estate, which is the collateral. Now, what is the risk factor on home equity lines of credit? The risk factor would be considered medium. The reason that it would be considered medium is because typically home equity lines of credit are going to be in second lien position, meaning that there's a first mortgage underneath and home equity lines of credit are in second lien position. Now, another reason that they're considered medium risk is because they're increasing leverage and decreasing equity on the collateral. Now, what are the features of a home equity line of credit? Like a credit card, you have access to a revolving line of credit up to a certain dollar amount. But because it is secure to an asset, again, typically some type of residential real estate, oftentimes the amount of credit that one can get approved for is going to be much, much higher. And as a matter of fact, some banks will have lines of credit up to $250,000. With an offset mortgage, you can get a line of credit for $500,000 or even more if the equity is there. Although the rate on a home equity line of credit will be higher than the first mortgage, it will be significantly less than what you're going to see on a credit card. Now, what are some of the cons of a home equity line of credit? Typically, home equity lines of credit are variable rate. And what that means is that the financing terms and the interest rate can change each and every month. So with that, there's going to be more interest rate risk because a lot of times, again, the interest rate is month to month on home equity lines of credit. And you typically don't want to carry large balances on a home equity line of credit because of the interest rate risk and the fact that that interest rate can change every single month. And if the interest rate changes or goes up, then the amount of interest getting charged and the payment that you're going to have to make is also going to increase. Now, you're probably wondering, how do I use home equity lines of credit?
How?
I love this type of credit. It's one of my favorite types of credit, and here's why. Mostly because I want to have access to credit at my fingertips, even when I'm not using it. And while I'm not using it, I'm not going to be charged any interest. But if I do need to use it for whatever reason, if there's some type of financial hardship, or if there's some type of large monthly expense, I have all of that right at my fingertips that I can use for whatever reason. I have multiple home equity lines of credit spread over multiple different properties. So when larger expenses do abound, I can use these lines of credit to pay for these expenses as they come up, and then I can use the monthly cash flow to pay these balances back down. I can also use these home equity lines of credit for down payment on future investment property purchases. Our next type of debt is going to be mortgage debt. Now, what is mortgage debt? Mortgage debt is going to be secured to real property. In most cases, it's going to be residential real estate. What is the risk factor on mortgage debt? Well, because mortgage debt is secure against the property and it's going to be in first lien position, the risk factor on this type of debt is going to be low. And another reason that the risk factor is going to be low is because there are so many different options when it comes to this type of debt. There are a lot of banks and a lot of financial institutions that will lend with this type of debt. And then there's a lot of different loan programs out there that offer this type of product. We have FHA, we have conventional, we have VA, we also have portfolio products. So it's going to be considered lower risk because there are so many opportunities out in the marketplace and because it's secured by real property. Now, what are some of the features of mortgage debt? Mortgage debt often allows for fixed interest rates over fixed periods of time that are going to be much longer than installment debt. For example, with mortgage debt, you can have the term be 15, 20, or even 30 years, whereas installment debt, again, that's going to be 3 to 7 years. And most importantly, mortgage debt is secured to an asset that is going to go up or appreciate over time. Mortgage debt is considered good debt. I consider it great debt. Installment debt, because it's secured to an asset that's going to go down in value, is bad debt. And mortgage debt will allow you to acquire more cash producing assets like residential real estate, which you can use for investment purposes, which you will then get rent on and you can build cash flow. Also, with the longer amortization period, such as the 15, 20, or 30 years, this is going to allow for much lower monthly payments, which will not have such a big disruption on your monthly budgeting. Now, what are the benefits of this type of debt? Well, typically you're going to have much lower interest rates. They're going to be fixed interest rates. The payments are going to be lower as well because of the longer term. And then you get the ability to control an asset that is going to go up in value using leverage. The cons? Well, the biggest con is that you want to make sure you're secure and confident with the financing terms and the repayment terms and that you can afford the monthly payment, because after all, you are going to have to make it month after month for the next 15, 20, or 30 years. Now, how do I use mortgage debt? I only consider the 30-year fixed. I don't ever consider a 15-year fix. I will never consider a 20-year term. I'm only interested in the 30-year. And the reason for that is because the 30-year, even if the interest rate is a little bit higher than what you could get on a 15 or a 20-year, the payment is going to be so much lower. I'm more concerned about my monthly payments and my monthly cash flow. And here's the deal. No one ever talks about this. If I pay additional principal on my 30-year, what I'm doing is I'm then reducing the effective rate of the interest that I'm paying. So I have the ability to control the amount of interest that I'm paying, but the minimum I'm required to pay is based off of the 30-year fix. So what it gives me is much more financial flexibility. If I want to pay it off in 15 years, I can do that. If I want to pay it off in 20 years, I can do that. But if I don't, and if I want to pay it off in 30 years, then at that point, I have the ability to keep that monthly payment on that 30-year, which is going to allow my cash flow to be as high as possible. And that is going to be a wrap for today. This is part 1. Next week, we're going to cover the 5 mistakes that most people make with their credit, and how do the credit bureaus score credit? What is the formula? What are they looking at? How do they determine an individual's credit score? We got a lot of insider information on this from my experience, and I'm gonna share all of that with you next week. This is Ben Adams with the American Offset Mortgage, signing off.